Residents of the Bahamas are breathing a sigh of relief as Hurricane Nicole, which made landfall on Wednesday, caused minimal damage to the country, a country which was just 3 years ago ravaged by Category 5 Hurricane Dorian. I spoke with Bahamian journalist Devontè Hanna, who was on the ground covering the storm. Joining me is Devontè Hanna from Eyewitness News in the Bahamas. Thanks for joining me, Devontè. I know for the past 48 hours for you, it's been pretty hectic. You've been on the ground covering the passage of Tropical Storm Nicole, which did upgrade to a hurricane when it passed over the Bahamas yesterday. Paint a picture for me. What has been the impact of the storm?
Well, so far we literally here in Grand Bahama, which is one of the islands that was affected. Two of them got the brunt of it. That would have been Abaco and Grand Bahama. Ironically, those were the two islands that were impacted by Hurricane Dorian back in 2019. So here in Grand Bahama, conditions have significantly calmed. We got the all clear earlier this morning. There's very minimal damage on the ground, just some down trees, some down branches, some flooding, but most of it has dried up a bit. In one of the settlements that is very low lying, it's called West Enya. Some homes, in the yards are still very flooded. We've also seen some shingle damage, but for the most part, the island has fared pretty well. Over in Abaco, though, there's been significant flooding because when the storm came, they were impacted by high tide as well as king tide. So within minutes of the storm hitting Abaco yesterday, the early mornings of yesterday, those areas were flooded, and some of those areas are still flooded to this time. So around, I think it was around 5 o'clock yesterday evening, we began to see the impacts of it early morning, like around 10. So around 5 o'clock, the storm intensified, but it was just pretty, like I said, not much damage. Just some large trees were snapped at the root. So far, that has been the biggest damage that we've seen, as well as some homes and some buildings. They've lost their shingles. But other than that, this island is one that has been experiencing storms for quite some time. The building code in the Bahamas is very strong within itself. As I would have mentioned, they went through Dorian a few years ago, so they were well prepared. They knew what they had to do in order to weather the storm, and about 75 miles per hour, they were able to handle that.
Of course, leading up to the passage of the storm, what was the feeling like on the ground by the Bahamian people?
Many are still afraid. We've gotten reports that there are people in both Grand Bahama and Abaco. When they hear rain, because they've been through Dorian, they tend to get afraid. So many people were afraid, but I think because of that storm just a few years ago, there was a heightened sense of preparation by residents. So when we arrived here in Grand Bahama, I think it was around 12 on Tuesday, which was 24 hours before the storm made landfall. There were residents in the grocery stores. There were residents filling up their cars with gas, doing all of taking all of the necessary precautions. But there were also businesses who chipped in as well. There was a business that literally took loads of sand and dump it and made it available for all the residents here on the island, and they were able to fill in their yards. And we saw residents and businesses with bags of sand in front of their door. They were taking every step necessary to stay as safe as possible for the passage of the storm, no matter the strength of it, which is what we've heard.
Now, I know in 2019, with the passage of Dorian, the island was significantly impacted. There was severe damage. Was there the fear that the country was not fully prepared as this storm approached? And how far along has the country recovered since Dorian?
Most of the residents they're still dealing with that. There's been significant damage, and I'm talking there are still bodies, people that are still not found at this time. As it relates to rebuilding efforts, a lot of homes are still damaged. If you take a ride through the eastern end of Grand Bahama, which is where I'm at right now, you literally see trees that stand like skeletons in forests because of the storm destroyed those areas. You'd see homes still not completed. In Abaco, there are still people that are homeless because they were unable to rebuild because the pandemic came the following year, which posed an economic challenge for them as well. And so, residents did what they could with this storm to ensure that they were as safe as possible. And I think, like I mentioned before, having to go through Dorian caused there to be a heightened sense of preparation on all fronts. Because even with the National Emergency Management Agency, which oversees storm preparedness and recovery, they were at the command center doing everything in their power to ensure that residents were as safe as possible. They were evacuating residents days before the storm, those residents that would be in the low-lying keys. And even though some residents decided not to leave, they never closed the door on them. They always welcomed them to come and evacuate if they wanted to.
Now, you mentioned that an all clear was given at about 5 o'clock. What has government's response been to the aftermath?
This morning, the acting prime minister, Chester Cooper, would have arrived in Abaco, which felt the brunt of the storm initially, and they are making their assessments there. They are pretty pleased that there was no major damage. Like I said, just some flooding, but these islands are very resilient, so they'll be able to bounce back from that. He'll be here in a few minutes, around 2:30 today, and he'll make his assessments to see exactly what would have happened there. With the government right now, their focus is on climate change and climate finance. Even right now, our prime minister is at COP27 in Egypt. And so this dealing with storms is something that the Bahamas has done for quite some time and something that they will continue to do, I'm sure. So government right now, they're ensuring that residents get the necessary items. So that's your cement and plywood and all of that, so on and so forth. That has been an ongoing effort since the passage of Dorian. And so right now they're going to continue that, and I'm sure they're going to boost that to ensure that residents rebuild following this storm.
And finally, what were the major lessons learned in this entire ordeal as a country?
Well, one of the lessons, I spoke to the Minister for Grand Bahama earlier today, and she said one of the lessons that they've learned is they need to improve the sewer system here, more drainage in the area, so that when there is flooding during these storms, the water has somewhere to go. So in West End, where we were just a few minutes ago, even when there's a king tide, the water tends to come over the shoreline and into the street. And so that is now seeing that this storm, even though it was very small, considering what they've been through in the past, they are now looking to shore up that area so that water can get in, get out as soon as possible for residents to be safe.